Do that too. Just don't let it graze out there in the yard too much. That's right. Yeah, you bring a big hefty bag. All right. There goes the high schoolers outside. See, the weather's nice. All right. Well, tonight we are on class 55. So we are actually coming down, believe it or not, like I mentioned a little bit last week, to the end of the season here. So we have tonight, we're going to be talking about Ezekiel. And Ezekiel, we're doing it chronologically by book of the Bible. Next one, not chronologically by a calendar. So we're going to do Ezekiel, then we're going to come back and do Daniel. And we got 3 weeks of Daniel after this, and then we have our Jeopardy night. So you guys are all ready to go, got your answers ready. We'll do our Jeopardy night against the kids, and then we're going to have a couple weeks off, and then we'll be starting our cookouts. So, yeah, last year was not necessarily a pretty sight for the adults, but but you know, this year we're looking forward to something better. Break. So tonight we're in Ezekiel. Ezekiel is during the time of the Babylonian captivity. We were talking about exile last week and how these people of Israel, the northern tribes, went first, and then the tribe of Judah, the southern part, went last. And there were 3 major events that happened during that time of the exile of Judah. First one's in 605 BC. That's when Nebuchadnezzar initially comes, and he takes a lot of the skilled craftsmen and workers and people who are educated and all that and drags them back to Babylon. Daniel went in that one. Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego, they all went in that first deportation. Then around, that was in 605, around 597, there was another deportation of people from Israel, from Jerusalem to Babylon. And in that one, that's when Ezekiel went to Babylon. And in that one, that's when Ezekiel went. Now, Ezekiel, at the time that he went into captivity, was not yet considered a prophet. He had not prophesying yet when he left. But when he went to Babylon, there were different things that people did when they were taken there. Because like I mentioned last week, the Babylonians were people who were kind of opportunists, and they wanted to get the best out of everybody that they could. So if you were a skilled craftsman, you went to Babylon and you picked up your trade and you worked in that craft. Or in a situation like Daniel and Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego, they were young men who were very quick to learn and things like that. They picked up on the language. They picked up on the customs very quickly. They were put into the king's service. They wound up in government positions as advisors and what have you else. And so they put them in different places. Ezekiel falls into a unique class because some were taken there and allowed not to really be in that service, the servitude, but were just settled there, and they had their own residence, and they worked common trade. And that's kind of what Ezekiel was. He had his own residence, and according to tradition and according to what we see in Scripture, it was a place that a lot of the Jewish people, the nobles and stuff, would meet at his house because he was a prophet, and he would prophesy to them. He would tell them things. And so we know that that was a place that they would gather. So Ezekiel was a unique prophet in that he didn't prophesy the coming destruction, but he was a prophet during that captivity. And he had prophecies about Jerusalem. And it's like, well, wait a minute. Why would he have prophecies about Jerusalem? He's already in Babylon. Well, because he has visions of what's going on still in Jerusalem, and how the corruption did not stop even after the people were taken into captivity. And that's what we're going to be looking at tonight. Now, I will tell you, and we've talked about it briefly, but I'll tell you that in this series we're going through, staying with what the kids are learning and stuff like that, we are not going to study Ezekiel in depth. And we're sure not going to study him in depth in an hour. But what we're going to be seeing is things that show why they were in captivity, but more importantly, things that point forward to Christ, things that point forward to restoration of Judah and returning to Jerusalem, and then ultimately things that will play more into the future. So we're looking at fulfillment in them returning to their land, which we see in the time of Ezra and Nehemiah. But we'll see them return to the land, and Ezekiel has some prophecy about that, as well as a future restoration for the people of Israel. And so that's what tonight is going to center on, is why they're kind of in captivity, what's going on while they're in captivity, and future for them really was. So we're going to miss a lot of Ezekiel's prophecy, especially when it pertains to later things or end time things. We're just not going to be able to cover it. So we're going to start in Ezekiel chapter 8. And in Ezekiel chapter 8, this is when Ezekiel is having a vision of things that have happened and things that are happening in Jerusalem. So he is speaking to the people, the Jewish people in Babylon, through what we're going to be reading tonight in this first part. And it says, in the 6th year, in the 6th month, on the 5th day, while I was sitting in my house and the elders of Judah were sitting before me, the hand of the sovereign Lord came on me there. I looked, and I saw a figure like that of a man. From what appeared to be his waist down, he was like fire. And from there up, his appearance was as bright as glowing of God. He took me to Jerusalem, to the entrance of the north gate of the inner court, where the idol that provoked to jealousy stood. So we have this Elijah. Wow, that was Ezekiel having this vision, but seeing this being like flame, like fire from the waist down and the top up, like glowing metal. And it grabs him by the hair and drags him up and suspends him between heaven and earth and says, take a look. And what we're going to see is, we see right here, he was taken to the entrance of the north gate of the inner court, where the idol that provokes to jealousy stood. And so he is seeing what they had done of the temple. Now, we know this from reading some of the other accounts and stuff like that, but we know that Josiah, which he probably would have been king about the time that Ezekiel was born, would have been about the time of Josiah. So Ezekiel probably actually grew up in a lot of that reform and then saw it total chaos again and wickedness. And so he's seeing this vision of what was there, and here's this idol that was there in the court. And it says, there before me was the glory of the God of Israel, as in the vision I had seen in the plain. Then he said to me, Son of man, look towards the north. So I looked, and in the entrance north of the gate of the altar I saw this idol of jealousy. And he said to me, Son of man, do you see what they are doing? The utterly detestable things the Israelites are doing here. Things in my sanctuary, but are even more detestable. And so we remember from last week we were talking about them going into exile, and even during the reign of Josiah, God said, hey, you did a great job. Thank you for the reform. Thank you for turning back to me. Thank you for reinstilling worship. But my anger still burns against Israel, and it still burns against Judah, and they're still going into captivity eventually here. But for your sake, because you were good, I'm not going to do it during your reign. For his reign, it happens very quickly. Things fall down. And they did these things, and part of them they were worshiping other idols. And here the people of Judah, the people that were called by God's name, were there worshiping other idols. And he says, do you see what they're doing here in the sanctuary? And again, it's a vision of what's going on. And so this is even after the Babylonians came. And he says, do you see what's happening here? And, of course, Ezekiel's like, oh, yeah. He says, I'm going to show you things that are even worse. This is just the surface. This is one of the reasons they're in captivity in the first place, and they're doing it again, but even more so now. And so it goes on and it says, then he brought me to the entrance to the court. I looked and I saw a hole in the wall. He said to me, Son of man, now dig into the wall. So I dug into the wall and saw a doorway there. And he said to me, go in and see the wicked and detestable things they are doing here. So I went in and looked, and I saw portrayed all over the walls all kinds of crawling things and unclean animals and all the idols of Israel. So he comes in there and he sees all these depictions of living gods rather than worshiping the one true God. And it says, in front of them stood 70 elders of Israel, and Jaazaniah, son of Shaphan, was standing among them. Each had a censer in his hand, and a fragrant cloud of incense was rising. So here's this whole group of leaders of Israel, the ones that are left after the captivity, and they're burning incense, each one to their favorite god. And this is happening in the court of the temple. And he says, but he said to me, Son of man, have you seen what the elders of Israel are doing in the darkness, each at the shrine of his own idol? They say, the Lord does not see us. The Lord has forsaken the land. And so this time when they went into captivity, unlike other times, they didn't repent and turn to God. They said, God's forsaken us anyway. Let's go look for other gods. And they had hardened their hearts. And they weren't even looking to the God of Israel. And so each one created his own favorite little god, an idol, and was in the temple courts burning incense to it and worshiping his own creation as God. But they were the ones creating their own idols. It says, again he said, you will see them doing things that are even more detestable. You saw the big idol, and then you saw all the individual idols they created in the 70 elders of Israel, each worshiping their own idol. It gets worse. God says, it gets worse. Then he brought me to the entrance of the north gate of the house of the Lord, and I saw women sitting there mourning the god of Tammuz. He said to me, do you see this, son of man? You will see things that are even more detestable than this. And what they're talking about here with this god that they mentioned, this Tammuz or whatever, was one of the pagan gods that they believed had to do with basically the rebirth of land, like in the spring and stuff. So in the dead of summer, when it's hot and dry and nothing is growing and everything is burning up, they believed that this god died. And every year he would die about that time. And then as the spring or the early year rains and stuff would come back up, he was reborn. And so they're worshiping the gods of the seasons. They're worshiping the things of the earth. And they're saying they're mourning his death. They're mourning his loss. They're mourning the fact that things are not as fertile right now and things like that. And so when it talks about them mourning, that's what they're doing, is they are lighting incense and worshiping another god yet, saying, but when he comes back and is reborn, then we'll have fertility and we'll have all this stuff again. And it says you're going to see even worse.